Welcome everyone to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you today because honestly, we have a fascinating and incredibly rapidly evolving situation to look at. Right now, we're going to unpack the chaotic military and diplomatic shifts unfolding across the Middle East. I mean, the geopolitical chessboard is moving at breakneck speed, and we've taken all of these really complex developments and distilled them right here for you. So let's jump right in.
Okay, let's dive into this. The entire focus of today's explainer really boils down to this one central question. Can a 60-day ceasefire actually hold in the Middle East? We're going to look closely at the logic behind this temporary peace deal and, more importantly, examine whether a negotiated pause can even survive the massive military violations we're already seeing on the ground.
Here's how we're going to break this all down today. First, the 60-day ceasefire logic. Second, military shifts and retaliations. Third, historic diplomatic realignments. And finally, global and domestic reactions.
All right, let's start with Section 1, the 60-day ceasefire logic and the strategic intent behind the pause.
To make sense of all this current chaos, we have to look at the actual document that set the whole thing in motion. It's a memorandum of understanding. In this specific context, it establishes a 60-day ceasefire period, and the intent here is to pause hostilities and create a window for negotiation. Basically, the whole idea of this 60-day window was just to give both sides, specifically the US and Iranian-backed factions, some time to step back from the brink of total war and maybe figure out a diplomatic path forward.
Now, this quote really sets the stage for where the US currently stands. J.D. Vance stated, "Iran signed a ceasefire agreement, we have honored it, but violence will be met with violence." It's a very strict, conditional approach, right? The U.S. administration is saying they are absolutely willing to honor the 60-day pause, but they're making an ironclad promise to strike back if the other side doesn't comply.
Let's move to Section 2, military shifts and retaliations, immediate violations on the ground.
So, that diplomatic intent and the harsh reality on the ground? Yeah, they collided almost instantly. Just look at this action-reaction timeline. It shows you how shockingly fast the terms of the ceasefire were tested. Day 1, the ceasefire is signed. By Thursday, Iran attacks a Singaporean ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Thursday night, the U.S. retaliates, striking Iranian coastal radar sites. You'd think that might hit the pause button, but no. Friday morning, a second civilian oil tanker gets struck, and by Friday afternoon, the U.S. is launching even more airstrikes. It was an immediate, dizzying escalation. Getting into the specifics of that initial violation in the Strait, the reports show that 4 one-way attack drones were fired at traversing ships. Now, the U.S. military intercepted 3 of them, but one drone solidly hit the upper deck of a massive cargo ship. And this highly targeted strike on commercial shipping, that was the precise spark that set off this intense cycle of retaliation.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how rapidly the U.S. rhetoric shifted right after those drone strikes. Donald Trump stated, "We are no longer able to be reasonable and will be forced to militarily complete the job." So we see the administration's posture morphing practically overnight. They went from attempting a negotiated 60-day pause straight into explicit, severe military ultimatums.
As the military situation deteriorated, critics of the ceasefire started pointing directly at this number, 60. This refers to the heavily circulated claim that Iran has enriched uranium up to 60%. The critics are using this number to argue that the 60-day pause is actually incredibly dangerous. Their argument? It doesn't promote peace at all. Instead, it just gives the Iranian regime a protected window to stockpile materials and build up their nuclear weapons capabilities without any interference.
And this military fallout is spilling over regionally in a really massive way. The U.S. straight up canceled further negotiations and launched its largest military deployment toward Iran. Meanwhile, Iranian state media, Fars, claim the country must obtain an atomic bomb to take the military option off the table. At the exact same time, Iraq starts targeting politicians loyal to Iran, and intense ground battles are breaking out between the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and Kurdish forces. It's putting this immense, unprecedented pressure on Iranian influence across multiple fronts all at once.
Moving on to Section 3, historic diplomatic realignments, reshaping the geopolitical chessboard.
And this brilliantly illustrates what's happening behind the scenes. While military strikes were dominating all the headlines, the geopolitical chessboard was fundamentally reshaping itself. Just look at this contrast. Under the past status quo, Lebanese officials frequently referred to a Jewish occupation and completely refused to formally recognize Israel. But under this new framework, for the very first time in history, the Lebanese government formally acknowledges Israel as a country. I mean, that is a stark, absolute shift away from decades of hostility.
This breakthrough comes from a formal trilateral agreement between Israel, Lebanon, and the U.S. The reported objectives here are very clear. The goals are to resolve long-standing issues through diplomacy, strengthen Lebanese state authority, and ensure arms remain exclusively with the Lebanese military. But make no mistake, the absolute core of this agreement, the central pillar, is ending the presence of Hezbollah's weapons and dismantling their militias entirely.
Marco Rubio actually highlighted the U.S. diplomatic framing of this historic deal, stating they are taking meaningful steps towards a future of peace, prosperity, and mutual coexistence. The U.S. is aggressively positioning this whole trilateral framework as a major foundational stepping stone toward expanding the broader Abraham Accords across the entire Middle East.
So tactically, how is this playing out on the ground? Well, it's operating a lot like a highly coordinated pincer movement. Step 1. The IDF remains in southern Lebanese territory for as long as a Hezbollah threat exists. Step 2. A pilot program begins in 2 specific areas. And Step 3, the Lebanese army enters those exact areas from the north to secure the state. What we're actually seeing here is the Lebanese government and the IDF operating with remarkably aligned goals to eliminate Hezbollah's control.
And these realignments, they aren't just contained to the Middle East. Over in Europe, Slovenia surprisingly announced it's withdrawing its recognition of a Palestinian state and relocating its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It's just another incredible piece of evidence showing us these rapid, globally unprecedented shifts happening right alongside the ceasefire timeline.
Which brings us to Section 4, Global and Domestic Reactions, how the world is interpreting the chaos. So the crucial point here is just how completely fragmented the domestic interpretation of all this is. Look at this breakdown of commentators. They come from entirely different political backgrounds. Cenk Uygur takes an anti-interventionist stance, arguing the U.S. is just being dragged back into an exhausting war by bombing Iran. Anna Kasparian takes a pro-sovereignty angle, saying the Lebanon-Israel agreement actually violates Lebanese sovereignty. And then you have Tucker Carlson, who is highly critical of the U.S. posture as a whole, arguing the administration is posturing weakly rather than acting strategically. So they are all entirely at odds with the administration's actions, but for completely different reasons.
Now, on the global stage, we're seeing this fascinating, honestly highly ironic contrast. France and Britain have publicly condemned the IDF's military operations in southern Lebanon. But on that exact same issue, the Lebanese government itself actively supports the operations. They're using them to dismantle Hezbollah's regional control and finally secure their own borders.
This tension extends deep into our Western alliances, too. When talking about NATO allies, Donald Trump explicitly stated, "We were disappointed, they don't want to pay anything, they're for a free ride." It really showcases U.S. leadership expressing immense frustration over a perceived lack of military and diplomatic support from European NATO members during this whole crisis. And right in the middle of all this high-stakes diplomacy and warfare, we get this incredibly surreal juxtaposition. The U.S. becomes the very first nation in history to host an Iranian FIFA World Cup team on the field and strike the country militarily from the sky on the exact same day. You literally can't make this stuff up. It just emphasizes how unprecedented, multi-layered, and frankly bizarre this geopolitical moment truly is. So, to pull the whole picture together for you, this 60-day window was supposed to be a pause, but instead, it acted as a massive catalyst. It simultaneously accelerated extreme military retaliations on the ground and historic, unprecedented treaties behind closed doors.
Which leaves us with this final critical thought to ponder today. As these power dynamics rapidly shift across the globe, will the end of these 60 days bring a lasting regional peace or an irreversible escalation? We are living through an incredibly volatile period in history, and the decisions being made right now are quite literally reshaping the world as we know it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. I really hope this helped you map out and understand exactly what's going on behind the headlines. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.